So today, once again, I don't have any notes. But I went through my old notes, things I haven't used. And one talks about getting close. Pretty open-ended. But it was referring to when I used to take photos on my Ricoh. Actually, before that, I looked up a vape is 600 puffs, the average one. And apparently that's 2 packs of cigarettes? Which means that in terms of nicotine, I was getting 2 packs per day at some point, even 3. I remember when I used to say I'll never smoke, because it doesn't make sense. And I will definitely never vape. And here I am. I think I smoke the same way I speak English. It just seems unnatural. I find that funny. Yeah, I remember when I said I would never do that. And I watched a video recently of a woman talking about things from her past. The interviewer was asking her, wouldn't you want to erase these things? She was saying she doesn't live with regret. And I've heard that many times, don't live with regret, because in the end it gets you where what happens to you gets you where you're supposed to be and turns you into who you're supposed to become. And for some reason, when she said it hit differently. This idea that you do these things that are mistakes, seemingly wasting time, seemingly doing the things that are wrong. But then 10 years down the line, hopefully you get to where you're supposed to be. And these things, you look at them as things that were supposed to happen. Now, if you're smart like my brother, you just never smoke or vape or become an alcoholic. But some people, they need to learn the hard way, I guess. Some people don't have the foresight. Anyways, the note which I read, an old note, mentions getting close. Now, it was in terms of my small Ricoh camera, a very small camera that I used last year to take photos of people on the street. And at first I was very uncomfortable with it. It was very difficult. And then eventually I just got used to it, and I got bored of it, of taking pictures of people. And I remember once I showed those pictures to a colleague at work. And the first thing she said was, "How did you get so close?" And so for the first time, I experienced these photos from someone else's perspective. And to me, it's a 28mm, so it's quite wide. I shoot at 28 or 35. But for the first time, I realized that from her perspective, not being a photography nerd like me, she hadn't seen, I guess she doesn't have the knowledge of photography that I have, and she hasn't seen as many photos. And so the first thing she thought was that perspective, she's not used to seeing that. A photo of a stranger, candid, so close. And so it made me reevaluate my stance and how I thought I was bored with it, and the value in it, in providing a perspective which people are not used to, and the fact that I had gotten used to it and had taken it for granted. But in speaking about getting close to people, I have had 2 interactions since last Sunday where I was able to get quite, I would say, close to people in a conversation. The first was last Sunday at climbing. I go climbing in the morning with my brother, and there was this guy, apparently 50 years old. He doesn't look 50 years old, but we had seen him previously and kind of just talked quickly about a climb once or twice. And My brother and I thought, he's got an accent, but we couldn't place it. And we talked French in front of him, and so he kind of opened up and actually started conversing with us because he happened to speak French as well. He's from Swiss, I think. Switzerland. He's Swiss. Something like that. And we ended up talking for close to an hour. And it's very nice when you open up with a stranger. And a few thoughts. First, I would say I'm able to... So at work, I practice this. That's the reason I value my job the most. That I get to practice... Whoopsie. Well... Disgusting. I get to practice trying to open people up. That's one thing. And practicing being more articulate too. But I would say the people I'm able to have an open conversation with are people who are at a 9 in openness. And if they're French, they can be at an 8. So they need to be really open for me to actually be able to get in a conversation with them. And what happens always is that they, the guests, start the process of opening up. And then I get in. I'm not comfortable enough to open them up, if that makes sense. Now my colleagues, the ones that I look up to, my managers, etc., they find it much easier to do that. You know, if you're at a 1, they'll still open you up. Maybe a 2. Depends on the person. But me, if they're at a 9, I'm able to do it. I let them initiate and open up, and then I push it further quite quickly. And I've realized a reason I'm not as open in general with people is that I really have no interest in surface level conversations. I just want to ask. For example, it was a couple at work that I had this really nice 1 hour conversation with during work. The first thing I want to say is, you know, how long have you been together? How do you make it work? Personal questions. That's what I care about. I don't care about the surface level bullshit, which I suppose I need to get better at, because that's how you get to the deeper stuff. You know, first you have to talk about the surface level stuff. Me, I just want to jump in. And at the end of the conversation, they told me it was the most intimate conversation they had with a stranger, or I guess with a stranger in that type of setting, you know, at a restaurant or in a hospitality setting. And so that was really nice. It was just a really good conversation, just like the one at the climbing gym. It's really nice when you open up to someone, a stranger, and when you get to know that person, just being reminded of how rich the world is, how enriching a conversation with a stranger can be. So it was motivational, just reminding me that I need to work harder to be able to get to an 8, I guess. Being able to open up more people, be more comfortable with it. So that's what I had to say about opening up. I have fuck all to talk about right now. I'm doing this Saturday, so I'm way early in terms of my schedule. Doing this Saturday for next week. I'm early. I have fuck all to say. So that's problematic. I have to complete a compilation video from the choir I filmed 2 weeks ago. I have to complete it this weekend. That's what I have to do. I have to buy groceries. Tomorrow, going to a comedy show. I have never been to a comedy show. So I'm doing that tomorrow. That's about it in terms of things that will be done this weekend. Also, I've rethought my workout routine. Even though I'm just getting back into it now. My approach used to be just work out every day, not necessarily very high intensity. And I've watched this video, no idea what the guy's name is, a bodybuilder from the 70s, I guess, 70s, talks about his approach of working really high intensity. His approach is every 4 day. And I think I'm going to take that same approach. Similar to eating. For example, Bruce Lee. I like to think about Bruce Lee and his approach, which was he would eat all day, I think 5 meals a day, and he would work out very frequently. Even mentioning he would work out anywhere he could. I think there's an anecdote, someone talking about how he would be leaning on a fence during a conversation and doing kind of working out. So his philosophy was to just work out all the time, which I thought I liked the idea of, because working out beyond the getting more muscular, stronger effect, the act of working out just boosts your energy and makes you feel good. So why not make that something you do every day, all the time? If you can, you start slowly and then you build up. But then I thought about my approach, and for example, I don't follow this eat all day approach. I like this idea of, I guess it's called the warrior diet, of eating 1 meal a day. I like this approach. I think it makes sense. And I suppose it makes sense to do the same with working out, to actually focus your energy on that one spot. This is when I'm working out. And every moment that I'm not working out, I am not working out. I'm recovering. So I think it aligns more with my approach, my philosophy, to work out infrequently or less often. So I think I'm going to do that from now on. I'm going to try and see how it goes. What else do I have to talk about? Fuck, man. I don't know. I guess. This is going to be my shortest ever podcast thing. Let's see, what do I have here? Fuck. There was a plan once upon a time. One poem every week. What's the word? A controversial topic every week. Fuck, I got a controversial topic. Men and women can't be friends. I said it. I have suspected that to be true for a while. And I actually saw a video yesterday on Instagram, someone mentioning that. What's his name? The guy with the mustache. Steve Harvey, talking about how a man and a woman can't be friends. And then I looked at the comments and everyone was saying, I guess he got divorced or he had a problem with his marriage. So mentioning that, and mentioning how, oh, you got such a small ego, a big ego, or you got such a small, what's the word? I'm sure there's a word. You're self-conscious. You're too self-conscious. Essentially calling him weak for feeling that way. And it's a question that I've thought about for a long time, right? Can men and women be friends? I used to feel like that's such a weird question. Yes, of course. Men and women can be friends, women and women, men and men. What kind of question is that? And then through experience, and through hearing other people's experiences, and through observing people, I have come to the conclusion that no, they can't. Now, of course, a gay man and a woman is different. But if you are a heterosexual man, I don't think you can be friends with a woman. That's my controversial topic for the day. And my brother likes to talk about the fact that scientifically, as a man, if you spend too much time with women, your testosterone goes down. And the opposite is true. As a man, if you spend time with a lot of men, if you're a competitive guy, if you do sports, etc., if you're in a competitive work environment, that boosts your testosterone. So he likes to remind me of that. just, it's a complicated topic, but at the end of the day, I do believe it's true. And how do I say this? The times I've seen people, men who are friends with women, to me was clear that there was more at play, that there was more under the surface, because that's just how it works. Tate likes to also use the example, if you're just if you're friends with a woman, you have a responsibility, but then they are not kind of delivering on their end by giving you sex, which I think is a weird, disgusting way of putting it. I don't think, because, you know, always going back to the example, you're walking home at night with your friend who's a girl, and you get attacked. You have a responsibility to protect her, right? That's in his words. You have a responsibility as a man to protect her because she's a woman. But how does he put it? You're kind of risking your life for a woman who doesn't give you sex. So that's not fair. That's stupid. You're walking home with your mother. She's a woman. You're walking home with your sister. She's a woman. You're walking home with your friend who doesn't know how to fight and who's kind of weak. Like, I don't think this idea of she doesn't give you sex, therefore, is weird. It doesn't make sense. That's not where it starts. Men who are friends with women, they want to fuck them. That's just a fact. And there's a difference between being a colleague, for example, you're a man, you're a colleague with a woman. But once it starts being, I want to hang out with you, I don't believe it. I'm trying to think. I don't know of many old people. It doesn't really matter even. It's just people repressing their true feelings. Yeah, I don't think men and women can be friends. I said it. There you go. Yeah. I don't. Sure, that might be the odd, anomaly, but the exception doesn't unprove the rule. Something like that. Wow, I'm really flat today. The video I made for my friend Adam released yesterday, Homesick. Pretty happy with it. And that's about that. Wow. Wasn't a good idea recording Saturday after work. It was not a good idea. Just feel drained. I don't feel drained, but I feel drained. Why? I guess it makes sense. I've been talking all day. When you're an introvert, it drains your batteries when you're forced to talk to people for too long. Fucking bullshit. I guess... Fuck, I'm gonna record these every Saturday now. Fuck this. Why do I feel so drained? It feels like I've spoken too much and now... Like I can't dig into my brain and my thoughts and my memories to say stuff that might be somewhat interesting. It's like the fucking link has been cut between my mouth and my mind. That's frustrating. I'd like to be able to lucid dream. I watched a film, a series on Netflix. Don't remember the name, but it centers around lucid dreaming quite a bit. And the technique is make it a habit to check whether you are in the real world during the day. So one thing was try to put your finger through your hand, right? It doesn't go through because you're not dreaming. And then the idea is that if you make it a habit, then you'll be able to do it when you're dreaming, and you'll see that you are dreaming, and you'll be able to control your dream. Fuck, I tried for so long, it didn't work. Counting your fingers was one. Trying to pass your finger through your hand. Or just randomly during the day, just, people looking at me. What the fuck is he doing? Checking if it's the real world. Never worked. Why not? I'll try again. Lucid dreaming sounds so fucking cool. I want to be able to daydream. Yeah, I got nothing. I'm all out. I'm thinking about these streaming now is the big thing. People daily streaming, people who stream like 24/7. I'm saying like a lot. Yesterday we were watching an NPR with a very famous artist. This motherfucker was talking way too much, and he was arming so much. My brother was getting upset, angry even. Pathetic, he said. How are you a huge star and you can't even express yourself fluently and explain yourself? You sound like an idiot. And we talked about it, my brother and I, for a while. And I said, I remember watching an interview with this artist. And he kept saying like. Why do I say like? Where did I get that from? Like. At work also, when I'm explaining the menu, for some reason I place these uhs. When I'm using them, it's like punctuation. I'm conscious of doing it as if it's good. It's like punctuation, and I need to get rid of them. So my brother and I, we ranted about how we don't like people who can't express themselves, especially people whose job it is, in part, to do that. And here I am working on it weekly. I also thought about going on, I think it's called Omegle. There's one thing like that, Omegle or Monkey, where you talk to strangers online to practice speaking. I thought about doing that, but I haven't done it yet because I'm scared. I don't know why. It just seems very uncomfortable. Fuck, I'll do that tonight. I'll do that. Maybe I should put a shirt on for that. Actually, similar to this, why? I don't give a fuck. I don't know why it's intimidating. I suppose just, there's water somewhere, right? Oh yeah. It is intimidating. I don't have to be this boring. Why? I don't have to be this boring, man. Don't have to. I'll just talk about a fucking movie idea or something, right? I'm sure there's one just randomly hanging around in my files. All I need is a title. Then I can talk about that. Did I talk about that? I don't even remember what I talked about, so that's not very helpful. Lordy Lord. Did I talk about Phantom Thread? Not the film. We talked about that with the couple, Eddie and Catherine, on table 21, with whom I spoke for about an hour. We talked about Paul Thomas Anderson. Eddie went to the same high school as him, just 4 years later. And how do I say this? Yeah, we talked about the films we like about his and the ones we liked less, and we agreed that Licorice Pizza was quite underwhelming and disappointing. Phantom Thread. I don't know if I talked about it. Post-apocalyptic, a story I want to write, or be a novel set in the future, after post-apocalyptic, in a small town in America. I guess I need to do some research, but the idea is a cloud has covered the entire surface. Fuck, I'm sure I've talked about this. Whatever, no one watches these anyways. I remember telling that to Ty, and she was like, and she said, I've never heard this before. Pretty sure there's a theory of how dinosaurs went extinct, which goes like this. A volcano erupted. It was so big that the clouds from the volcano, they have this these majestic clouds, volcanoes. They look like concrete. They look so thick. They're beautiful. The cloud just covered the entire surface of the Earth. Pretty sure that's a thing. Did I just make that up? I don't know. But imagine something happened. We don't explain it in the film, in the story. But clouds now cover the entire surface of the Earth. Now they are the perfect thickness so that we don't actually freeze to death. But almost. It's really cold. Yeah, I've talked about this before. Yo!
Ciao, Ombre.
Ah, ciao, party boy. Enjoy.
Ça sent le tabac.
Ouais.
Tu fumes du tabac?
J'ai fumé une cigarette.
Espèce de couillon. Ouvre ta fenêtre quand tu fumes du tabac.
Je peux pas. Ça
Non,
va.
tu peux pas.
Le sound. Fuck off. I'm busy.
Tu fumes juste parce que t'as envie d'être stylé pendant ton podcast?
Non.
Ok. Je sais pas, ça sent chez le tonton. Pas plus, mec. Bonne soirée. Wish me luck.
Good luck, bro. You got your fish covered?
Non, je vais lâcher. Enfin, d'abord, je vais envoyer un message au mec.
Who does a barbecue at midnight? At night? It's a day thing, no? Yeah, I talked about Phantom Thread before. Yeah, I'm sure there's a story somewhere that I haven't talked about because there are countless stories. Let's see. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Huh. No. What's this? Okay, I just need to accept that this episode has come to an end. This is pathetic. I'm grasping at nothing here. I'm actually curious. I'm going through my notes. I get a new idea for a story at least weekly and then never follow through. I've talked about echoes. Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. Well, fuck this. I'm really fucked. I suppose I could do it. Just delete this and do it again tomorrow. But nah. Nah. I got this year's worth of notes here. Huh. Oh, I remember one. I had this idea. Yeah. Fucking hell. Where is it? Oh. I had this idea for a story called The Giant. I want to film it in Falmouth, where I went to university, in black and white, and film it with my Blackmagic pocket camera. And the story is, these two lady detectives go to Falmouth as detectives to investigate a crime. There's a film called The Giant, which features a giant, and I just stole the title and partly the story. But the story is these detectives arrive in Falmouth to investigate a crime which the locals are pinning on a giant. Now, no one's seen a giant, but the way the person was killed, it looks like they were squeezed by a finger. The detectives naturally don't believe it's possible, so they research, they look at the tools around, the equipment. It's probably somewhere near, like, somewhere near a farm. Like, arms, us. Fuck them. Anyways, too, should be gotten rid of. The detectives don't believe it's possible that a giant did it, And throughout the story, we don't believe it, but then eventually turns out there is a giant. Wow, amazing. But the story centers on, so the two detectives, one of them is an actual detective, and one of them, I think, is more of a reporter. Is she? I don't recall. And one of them actually is one of those words I need to get rid of. One of them studied in Falmouth previously. So she's returning to a place she knew, and some people from her past are still there. Why the fuck did I become interested in this story? There's no substance there. Why did I like it? One thing I liked was the tilt shift effect you can do with the camera. That's a very nerdy thing, but essentially, I don't know how to explain it in a way that would be simple. You can create a miniature effect easily with your lens by simply not locking it into the camera and tilting it. Tilt shift. If you tilt it, the plane of focus won't be parallel to the sensor, and as a result, when you tilt it, you can create exaggerated out of focus areas. And you've probably seen that on videos, on time lapses of cities, and it looks like they're miniatures. Now that's very easy to do. I remember when I found out, I would put tape around my lens and tape it to the camera. That way I was able to twist it. Then eventually I bought an adapter, which is quite shitty and doesn't work very well. But I love this idea of the tilt shift lens, and I feel like it's never been exploited well in movies, the tilt shift lens. The only times I've seen it really is in time lapses, gimmicky time lapses of cities. It's been used in Hereditary by Ari Aster, a guy who knows about equipment quite well, movie equipment, who's very interested in visuals and cinematography. And so the idea was, that's something I think about a lot when constructing a story as a film. You had to think about everything. The aspect ratio, the equipment, everything. Is it color, is it black and white? All these factors, which seem to be just arbitrary in most movies, they make a big difference. And the tilt shift lens, as a piece of equipment, creates the sense that you're looking at a miniature. So I thought it would be a very cheap way to give you the perspective of a giant. Now remember, in Hereditary, there are miniatures, right? So it makes sense that he uses a tilt shift to make the real world seem like a miniature at times. Now, I don't think he exploited that idea well at all. He hardly uses the tilt shift. I can't think of any significant moments in the movie. I think it's a wide shot of the house where he uses the tilt shift. It doesn't even look really that much like a tilt shift lens shot. But the idea of, in that story, the giant, there would be a person, perhaps the person who people think is a serial killer, who works with miniatures. So I like the idea of blending, being unable to tell whether you're looking at a miniature made by that character, or you're looking at the real world from the perspective of the giant. That's one thing I liked. That's the thing, making a movie is an art form in itself, and a lot of people look at it as Alfred Hitchcock used to say, making a movie is just translating the script to visuals, as if the script is God, and you're just transferring it into visuals. Now, he was a great filmmaker, but I hate this idea, and I think that filmmaking being such a new art form, people really look at it in simplistic terms. As I said, it seems like things like aspect ratio, lenses, even camera, black and white color, these are things that are so arbitrary. For example, if you want to make a mainstream movie, you don't make it black and white. Most people don't make movies in black and white. Aspect ratio, people don't seem to talk about it enough. Most filmmakers will pick the same aspect ratio for every movie. I think it makes an enormous difference. And this idea of centering, this idea that, for example, a tilt shift lens is a factor in telling a story that only exists in filmmaking. I remember when Guillermo del Toro was talking about how they wanted to get rid of the editing nominees in the Oscars for the live broadcast. Show that during the ads, so that people watching it on TV wouldn't see that part being shown. And he mentioned how editing belongs to filmmaking. It's something that only exists in filmmaking. Choreography, even acting doesn't belong to filmmaking. You go to the theater, but at the theater there's no editing. It doesn't exist. Only in filmmaking, that's something that belongs to filmmaking. Only exists in that art form. Right? So when you look at a film, it's not just you have a story and then you ask people to act it. Once upon a time, a camera would just be placed. You couldn't move it, and people would act in front of the camera. Once upon a time, there's no sound. Now we're in a place where filmmaking, you can really maximize the tools you have to tell a story if you're creative. And I like this idea of looking at the tilt shift effect, for example, which I feel hasn't really been exploited in cinema. Really, the only time I can think of it being used is in Hereditary. And think, what does that technique evoke? What does it link to? And immediately I thought, well, it's the perspective of a giant. And I think back to Hereditary, where they used it, you have the miniatures. Now that's interesting, because you look at a miniature from our perspective, and you look at the real world from a giant's perspective, and it looks the same. So linking the two, blurring the lines so that people watching are uncertain what they're seeing, which is something that's very natural in a horror film, blurring the lines, making people uncomfortable and unsure. In psychological horror, it's, commonly used. So I try to build on that idea. How do I maximize the technique that is the tilt shift? Haven't gone really far yet. Once again, as far as I know, once the giant gets made, that would be the piece of filmmaking that uses the tilt shift to the most of its capacities as a tool to tell a story. I can't think of films that use the tilt shift lens effectively and that maximize the tool and the technique. So that, I already think it's a good start, but it's not enough. Essentially what I'm saying is I can see shots of the real world with a tilt shift lens, and then shots of a miniature with a regular lens and blurring the lines. That's not enough. And I guess it could look, before we reveal that there is an actual giant, it could look like a creative choice to shoot certain scenes with a tilt shift lens until you realized eventually that you are seeing the world through the killer's perspective, and the killer happens to be a giant. I'm also thinking, I'm sure there's multiple movies where, for example, it starts with In, because it's been made by Christopher Nolan, and most of his movie titles start with In. It doesn't start with In, does it? Inception, Interstellar, Insomnia, The Prestige. Okay, it doesn't start with In. The Prestige is a film that I was very disappointed by when it ends, because I thought, surely there's a very clever twist that makes everything make sense. And the very clever twist is that he cheated. It's not real, right? I won't spoil it. Well, fuck it, I'll spoil it. It's an old film, 2009, I think. The twist at the end is that a character is cloning himself, and the story is set in the 1800s, I think, or maybe later, early 1900s. Not sure. All time. Just people don't clone themselves anyways. It's not a thing, even today, as far as we know, as far as the public knows. But the twist is that he's cloning himself. So throughout the whole movie, me at least, I think, this is Christopher Nolan. Surely there's a logical explanation that will make me think, oh my god. For example, the twist that Christian Bale has a twin brother. When that happens, mind blown. That was a very clever twist. Well done. And it makes sense. But then when Hugh Jackman is cloning himself, that's cheating. You can't clone yourself. I thought you were going to give me a logical answer to my questions, and then you go and cheat and give me kind of something similar to Deus Ex Machina, kind of a cop-out, it felt like. Now, I've seen the movie multiple times. I've grown to like it more. And in fact, I've grown to like the idea of, throughout the whole story, you think, well, magic doesn't exist, right? So at the end, there's going to be a very clever twist. And the very clever twist is that magic does exist, at least in that world. And that's something that attracted me to the idea of, throughout the whole story, surely there's no giant. There's some creep trying to make us think that there is a giant. And then the twist at the end is that actually, in fact, there is a giant. That's one thing I liked also from The Giant, the movie, which was very disappointing and not a good movie, I think, in my opinion. It wasn't very good, except for the cinematography, which was unusual. And I did enjoy that. This looming figure. Well, actually, that's the fucking plot twist in The Giant. Is that, or is it? It's open-ended. Is there a giant? Is it just a metaphor? Also, I like this idea of, there's so many art house movies and independent movies that are all about the creature that is the metaphor. Always. For example, The Giant, the movie, it finishes, and is there a giant? Is there not a giant? In the end, you don't really know. In the end, it's all metaphorical bullshit. And it seems like those movies where the person who thinks themselves an author, a cinematic genius, they love this metaphorical bullshit where in the end, is it what it pretends to be? Is it what it looks like? We'll never know. There's no answer at the end. Everything is just metaphor and bullshit. And I like this idea of, so in my story, oh, is there a giant? Is there not a giant? And then at the end of the story, there is a fucking giant. He's an actual character. He's actually killing people. There's no metaphor. There's just a giant killing people. Going against the grain of the low-budget art house film. I haven't thought about this story in a while. There were other things. One of the characters, who was a guy that one of the detectives had known in the past, who still lives in Falmouth, has a radio station. I like the idea of him always being on the radio when they're in the car, or when one of them is by themselves, and talking about the town. I also was attracted to the idea of shooting something. I was attracted to the idea of shooting something in Falmouth as a location. I thought it could be made with a very low budget, The Giants, since we never really see the giant until perhaps the end, and we create the sense of his existence through a very simple effect. I guess I should find my notes for this thing. Definitely too ambitious right now. Okay, I've talked for a bit. It's crazy how once I'm talking about something that I know, even though The Giant, I don't remember much, I'm much more fluid. Much more fluid. Preparation, right? You fail to plan, you plan to fail. I got shit tons of things to plan for at the moment. I can delete that note. Well, thank you for listening if you did. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you and good night. I can't even see the camera. It's so dark in here. I don't know where I'm looking. I don't know if I'm looking at the camera right now or at the corner of my room. Is there nothing else to say? Every time this thing finishes, I think, oh, there was this and that I didn't mention. But for the life of me, I can't recall at the moment. So thank you and goodbye.